The question that is the ultimate question is, am I saying yes to more things than I can reasonably accomplish? Pastors are notorious for this.
Yeah.
I can't say no. I just got to keep saying yes, even though I really don't want to go. I'm going to walk in the door with a bad attitude, but a smile on my face. You can only do that for so long before you start to inwardly just collapse. Well, everybody, welcome to the Glass House. I am flying solo today, which is kind of sad. Lindley's not with me, but I was excited because I wanted to get my friend Tim Weed on this episode, and we want to talk about how to stay healthy in ministry. And Tim, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself and what you do for NAM.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben. It's great to be here and sharing this time with you. I currently, my role in ministry is that I serve at the North American Mission Board, particularly with the SEND Network. And my particular focus in lane is I oversee soul care and spiritual formation as it relates to our SEND Network.
I love that. So your full-time job is to just help planters be healthier people.
Yeah, it's such a great position. And really my focus has been more of our staff. The way I tell folks is I'm like a pastor to pastors, if some might be more familiar with that within a local church, minister to the ministers. And so my lane, my emphasis is our staff that's scattered from Alaska to Puerto Rico. I basically have the responsibility of helping them just kind of stay in love with Jesus, stay connected to the Father, and get to shepherd them and care for them.
Well, we did this study, Lifeway did a couple of years ago, on senior pastor health. What are the biggest challenges you're facing in ministry? And man, we were hoping it would be a couple of things. Dude, it was everything. It was everything from how to figure out evangelism to discipleship. And it was everything from I'm struggling in prayer to I'm struggling with physical health. In fact, one of the statistics that really stood out to me was a vast majority of senior pastors are not happy with their bodies. They feel like they're not taking care of themselves. It's getting worse every year. They're on a negative trajectory. And I wanted to talk about physical health today, but also spiritual and emotional health and some other things. And I thought,
great.
You and I recently had a cup of coffee around this, and this is something you think about a lot.
Yeah. Hey, I'd love to dive into this. It's been a journey for me in this, decade of my life that is towards the end of my ministry journey, so to speak, at least full-time vocational ministry journey. And so it's been some ups and downs, and some have been by default and some have been by intentional as far as my journey that I've taken. So love to unpack this and learn from it, but as well as serve you in whatever way we can today.
Well, here's my take, and I want you to weigh in on this. But as I travel around and talk to pastors all over the country, I've noted that the healthiest ones fill 4 buckets. You might think of another bucket, but let me tell you the 4 that I've noticed. The guys who really seem vibrant ministry, they're taking care of themselves. They still seem happy. They like people. They enjoy their jobs. They're not just, riding it out. These are the 4 buckets. Number 1, health. Number 2, hobbies. Number 3, family. And number 4, friendship. And in each of those buckets, I have a series of questions that emerge that are not your typical questions around this. So for example, let's start with health. Okay. When it comes to the first bucket, there's 3 different components of health: spiritual, emotional, and physical. So when it comes to spiritual, am I spiritually healthy? Here's some things. Am I growing in godliness? Am I pursuing humility? Am I practicing spiritual disciplines? Am I enjoying prayer? Those are just the kinds of diagnostic questions I think healthy pastors are asking. Emotionally, am I taking on more than I can tackle? Am I burning the candle at both ends? Am I being vulnerable with anybody? Am I accountable to anyone? Am I unwilling to forgive some people in my church? Those are the kind of emotional questions that come up. And now let me cover physical, and then we'll come back and talk about all 3. Simple things just as simple as, am I exercising? Am I moving my body? For some people, it's, am I weight training? Others, am I running? Am I getting fresh air? Am I eating balanced meals? One way I heard one guy say this, When my wife looks at me, does she see a guy that gave up? That's a really good question.
Wow, yeah.
When it comes to physically healthy questions. So spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Let's talk with spiritually first, Tim. What do you see as some of the main distractions for guys in ministry with just staying spiritually healthy?
Yeah, I think, and this is common, this is not profound. I think your study and others would identify with this. That way too often, I feel like in my own journey, as well as in conversations of people who've been in ministry for a while, we have become so enamored with the ministry and the call to minister that replaces, maybe even overshadows our own kind of spiritual intimacy, our own spiritual walk. We've equated a sense of spiritual activity as spiritual intimacy or spiritual closeness. And that's not the way that that's not the way Jesus lived. And so recapturing that, and I will say this, thankfully, I'm seeing more and more young ministers and church planters, and even some of the older ones who are beginning to recapture that and keep that balance in check. Because that kind of makes sense
Makes
what I'm
total
saying
sense.
There.
You know, one for me that I've begun to notice that I'm enjoying more and more is just sitting by myself in quiet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not trying to knock out a book from an next sermon prep, not trying to make myself a better Christian. I read this about A.W. Tozer recently. The preface to The Pursuit of God, there's a little biographical piece about him right there, and it says that he would often spend hours in wordless worship.
Yeah.
Just being quiet before the Lord.
Yeah.
That's hard to do in this day and age when your watch is buzzing, your phone is buzzing. We don't get enough quiet.
You know, and sometimes our I don't know if you want to call it our natural wiring, our personality works against us. I have, for most of my life, would describe myself as activistic. If you look at some of those personality inventories, I'm at that kind of descriptor of achiever, activistic, always doing, and so for me, the sense of even though I'm an introvert by that kind of personality characteristic, it's always about doing and going, and so to sit still sounds like it's counterproductive to what is best and helpful towards others. But like you, I would say that particularly even in when I'm thinking of where I'm growing these days, the last couple of months, I have been much more intentional about building that rhythm or that practice into my life of sitting still. And it really has, at first it's a little awkward.
Oh, it is.
Because my mind is racing and I'm thinking what I got to do, but it's been such a sweet time for me. I'm really encouraging a lot of folks to build into the rhythm of their spiritual disciplines, this sense of silence and solitude, how refreshing that will be for your soul. There's all kind of biblical references towards that, particularly when you look at the life of Jesus. So don't even have to kind of defend it. Is this something, what we know and what we do sometimes is miles apart. So.
Do you remember that part in Shawshank Redemption when Brooks gets released from prison? And have you seen Shawshank? If you haven't, please don't say it because I'll never listen to you again.
Why don't you just tell me about that scene?
Okay, so there's this guy that's literally spent his entire life in prison. It's his only thing he knows. All of his best friends are there, and he gets released. Yeah. And he gets out, and he realizes how fast the world has gotten. Cars everywhere, and it's just a much more fast-paced world. And this is like in the mid-'50s, I think, or '60s. It's set way back when. And he ends up, it's tragic, he ends up taking his own life, and he sends a letter to his friends and says, the world went and got in a big darn hurry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that today, like even with my kids when I watch them, like there's just so much information flying and so much anxiety in the wind that we don't even realize the water we're swimming in anymore.
Yeah. You know, and again, this would be like, oh yeah, I've read that and I've seen that, but sometimes we need to feel this a little bit more. So you referenced a movie. I'm going to go to the Bible. So the
Jesus, Juke.
but it's just amazing how we can kind of almost skip over and go, isn't that good for him? I mean, Jesus is God's son. And how often do we see him retreating to the mountain or retreating to the garden for the time of prayer to stay connected to the Father, to be alone with the Father? And if Jesus, being God's son, practiced that, needed that, desired that, I mean, how much more so for us do we need to have that in our own life? And again, it goes counterproductive to, I don't want to be critical about this, our Americanized kind of Christianity is about achievement and more and what's progress.
Yep.
And to the neglect of our own soul, where there needs to be progress, development, Jesus formed more fully in us by being alone with the Father. And so it's just again, that's where I'm at in my journey these days. And really it's been transformative.
We could literally spend the entire episode here because I think one of the hardest things for pastors is to continue to serve people spiritually while also being served spiritually and growing. So we're going to put a pin on that and keep going.
Okay.
The emotional one, I think, is probably, to me, the most interesting one. I think Pete Scazzaro has done a ton of great work here in terms of emotionally healthy spirituality. But the question that is the ultimate question is, am I saying yes to more things than I can reasonably accomplish? Pastors are notorious for this.
Yeah.
You know, I can't say no. I just got to keep saying yes, even though I really don't want to go. I'm going to walk in the door with a bad attitude, but I'll a smile on my face. You can only do that for so long before you start to inwardly just collapse.
Yeah. You know, I reflect back to my earliest memory of coming to that understanding and that tension. I was actually working at the Baptist Sunday School Board during this time, and was working with a camp in the church recreation area. And I had been giving all these opportunities. I mean, I'm a 24-year-old, 23-year-old single guy, and like, hey, come speak at this retreat, come do this, come do that. And absolutely. When the invitation came, I thought that was like God's will, that if I'm given the invitation, step into it, you know? And I distinctly remember one time having just gotten back from one that I was terrible. I was not emotionally, physically, spiritually where I needed to be. And people were like, oh, that was, nice and wonderful and everything. But I remember writing my journal, just because God opens a door does not mean that it's his will for me to step through it. It was something like that. It was for me. I had to write that down because saying yes to everything means eventually I'm saying no to something else. There's probably, there's somebody who's written a book and chapters about that, so to learn to say no, when we learn to say no, it's in reference to a higher or a better yes. And I was saying yes to everything, which was basically, killing me spiritually. So, and I think that still happens.
A big mark of maturity is bringing the full weight of who you are to the table in terms of, hey, I just have to be honest with you. That's not something that energizes me. I'm not good in that environment. Like, for example, I'll just be honest with you, Tim. I am a terrible youth speaker. I don't know why. Those rooms energize my friends. I go into that room and I feel like, where am I and why am I here? I'm not equipped. I don't feel called particularly good at speaking to students.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time to just be honest about that.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. I think I can do a good enough job that people will be like, hey, thanks for coming. But in my soul, I know that really wasn't something that energized me. And I could have been devoting my energy to something I'm more passionate about. So as we get older, I think we get more burned out by those things and we get to where we just can't keep saying yes.
Yeah. That to me, that's the issue of self-awareness and where you know who you are and what kind of energizes and what doesn't and what the opportunity does and provides for you and what you maybe should say no to. And at this season of my life, I feel like in many ways I'm learning some things about myself in my 60s that I wish I would have known in my 30s or 40s. And maybe a lot of people in their 30s and 40s do. Maybe I'm a slow learner. But it is to inspect myself. And so that's the kind of the word that I have begun to use is like, I'm inspecting. We're talking about the emotional side of things. Why did I feel that?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? What's the origin of that? And because we all know when we feel things that are inappropriate, whether it could be anger or even fear, or it could be an unhealthy attraction. There's something in us that is behind all that. And unless we're willing to, again, do this withdrawal and inspect what's happening in us, I feel like that we can just keep going or try to mask it. And that's not healthy for our soul.
Yep. I think you're right. You got to get down to the root of what's the yearning, that sense of incompleteness that has to be handled and dealt with. So much of the progress I've made in this is just by seeing someone, a counselor, somebody that's trained and kind of guiding you through those internal conversations. I encourage all pastors in ministry to regularly see a counselor, even if it's just to download hurt, pain, confusion. I think we use counseling way too much as an emergency brake. Like when things are really bad, I pull that thing. But proactively, even if it's just a really good friend that's a great listener, we all need somebody to download those vulnerable feelings with.
This may not be the case for everyone. Every marriage relationship's more unique with the personality challenges between the husband and wife. But just this past week, I had this conversation with my wife, Melody, and I said, "Hey, I am giving you permission. I really want you to do this. Is that when you see an emotion in me, and it could be either a tone, or it could be a facial. Like if I'm doing this, that's conveying something. Then you have the permission to just simply say what's going on inside of you.
Yeah."
And that's helping me to recognize something came up that maybe I didn't want it to come up, but it's already affecting others, affecting her, or at least she's noticing it. Because at the end of the day, I want to be that type of person that my emotions are not ruling who I am. I am not my emotions, but I have a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
And so that's been a kind of a helpful conversation that we just had this past week. And whether it's a counselor or a friend or a spouse or somebody, to give them that invitation to ask what's going on, what's behind that.
Tim, in the interest of being kind to ourselves, even something like so many men in ministry struggle with pornography. If you really look down at the deepest root of that, it's loneliness.
Yeah.
It's a longing for connection. And, as men struggle with thoughts like that, I think the first question is where do I need to care for my soul that I'm so alone right now that's the manufactured joy I'm going to go after? Like, is that the best option? But don't be angry at yourself for longing for connection. That's a really good thing.
Yeah.
So talk to somebody about how you can care for that and develop closer connections with people rather than having to run to a drug or something else.
Man, I'm so appreciative of your sensitivity to a wider range of audiences like that. And so, my take on that, or my response to all that, is that ask the question of, what is it that I'm really wanting? And again, maybe I'm getting to this season. I don't know. Maybe it should like be me, or I'm asking myself a lot more questions. What is it that I'm really wanting? Right. And if there's a longing that is driving me towards a sense of connection or a sense of a pleasure, dopamine. There's a lot of studies these days on dopamine and the effect, the pleasure sensation, and so how that feeds certain things. And so if it's something that's giving us a pleasurable moment or experience, that if that's an unhealthy or inappropriate kind of pleasure-seeking experience, I want to think that God created the community of believers in such a way that we need each other.
Yeah.
And so the shame or the guilt that comes from some of those emotions that maybe have resulted in some type of action, we need to have a voice. We need to have an Aaron and her there. And so whether it is a friend, a trusted friend, a counselor, a paid friend is what I call a counselor, or someone,
a paid friend. That's great.
Yeah. Someone that we can, Satan, we know this, Satan works in the dark. So when we internalize all this, we're actually giving and never really get it out. We're giving him room to even work in that area. Again, we don't have time on this podcast to talk about this part of it, but just recently have begun to understand the beauty of confession. And there's a part of confessing to God, for sure. But there's a part where Scripture, confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed. There's something about the beauty of verbally confessing, talking with,
yep.
And it's not to heap shame. It's actually to be free. You talk about your movie. I'm talking about, Braveheart, freedom, right. Kind of comes from that sense of confession.
Yeah.
And so
that's really good.
We could chase that a lot more.
Let's move to the last one, which is physically healthy, which is one that men don't talk about a lot.
Yeah.
Tim, I know you've gone through a health journey.
Mm-hmm.
You got a health scare some years ago. It really changed you. You've gotten way more deliberate about your care of your body. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm taking a note here. There's two reasons. I'll talk about the journey that I was on, or the scare that came up very quickly, and then what's come out of that. So, hey, we age, things happen. We live in a fallen world. And so it wasn't out of abuse or lack or anything like that. I have been a fairly active person, but all of a sudden my heart started going crazy. And it started with waking up one morning after sleeping, all night, waking up, and people may not notice your Apple Watch I had on that night. It's buzzing. And it's saying extremely high heart rate. I just, I kind of like hit it and went back to sleep. I thought something's broken. And, but what was happening is my heart started racing. And, I did it again an hour or so later. So I went and got checked out. And the short story of it is, that through a couple of years of kind of treating my heart, because it was AFib and atrial flutter. Those are the things. It wasn't fixed. And it was during the time of COVID, where all the hospitals were shut down, that things went crazy again. And we discovered that I had a tumor that was on my adrenal gland that was shooting adrenaline up into my heart. And that is what was the cause of it. But it's a very rare condition. Doctors don't even look for it. But like, for example, one of my blood pressure readings was 290 over 210. And so that's stroke level and all this. And so after we discovered what it was, had the procedure by a very skilled surgeon to be able to remove that. Then not everything settled back down, but that was the issue. And so I took it upon myself to say, I'm not obsessive about it. But hey, I've got a temple here and I want to pay attention to it. And, I want to get as much mileage out of my temple, my body as I can. And so I began to look at more things, and we'll talk through maybe a framework of 3 things that I am trying to incorporate on in just a minute. So that's one part of it. But honestly, the other thing, and I've said this for years, the other reason that I've started to pay a lot more attention to my body is something like this right here. This is this is my granddaughter, and so I've got one, and I've got another one due in January, and I want to be able to be that type of grandfather that can play with my grandkids. And so what I've said, the statement I've used, and I probably copied it from somebody, I don't know who, but is like, my 70-year-old self is going to thank my 60-year-old self for some of the things I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
It's going to pay dividends when I'm in my 70s and 80s.
Pastors, it's hard. You get up there in the pulpit every Sunday. People can tell. if you're taking care of yourself or not. It is a part of your public witness. And I think church people are gracious. I don't think they expect their pastor to be on a CrossFit magazine.
Right.
I do think they expect him to be responsible.
Yeah.
And to take the same level of care for himself that he would encourage them to take of themselves. And there's been a bit of a running joke for years that pastors, eat too much and don't pay attention to their own self-care. And that really does matter. It matters not only in your own personal health, but it matters on how people perceive you and the credibility you have.
I am thankful that we have moved out of, I think we have, and I try to be positive about this, that we moved out of the model type of image that everybody's so obsessed with, especially females in our culture. I've got 3 girls, and this is things we've had to navigate with them. The model, Mr. Fitness, to a little bit more of a balanced up. It's not about the look and the image. It's about the health.
Yeah.
And health, you don't have to have, the cut chest and abs and all of that to be healthy. And so I am thankful that I'm seeing more to try to help ease that pressure or that burden or that guilt. Well, I could never be like. No, you're not supposed to be like.
Yeah.
But you're responsible for what you have. So let's talk about the 3 areas. And for me, there's 3.
Yeah. Give us those. What are those 3 for you?
Yeah. So when you look at they're rest, eat, and move. Okay. Really deep, really profound. I know it's going to be hard to remember that. Okay.
Rest well, eat well, move well.
All right. And when you look at, and I have them in that order, when you look at Genesis 1, when God started creating everything, and the Bible says, I think it's verse 5, that it was evening and day of day 1. And in the Hebrew mind, the day starts with the evening. And so one of the most neglected emphases, I feel like, at least as I was growing up and in ministry, was the emphasis on sleep. In fact, we were rewarded, celebrated, acknowledged when I was up till 1 o'clock last night doing, whatever it is, type of thing. And that's not God's design. We work from rest. We live from rest too. And that's the whole part of spiritual formation in our life. What I do for the King and serving him should come from a place of resting in him. But from the physical side of things, the day really needs to start with saying, what kind of rest sleep patterns do I have? So that's the rest piece. There's a lot of studies out there. We talk about the maximum number. Most people know, I need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Some don't, but it's very few. I think it's like less than 3% are physically wired to where they can function well with less than 7 hours of sleep at night. There's one study, I can't cite it, so I don't know if this will make it or not, where it came from, but it said 4 days in a row of less than 7 hours of sleep has the same effect on you mentally and physically as being drunk. Your body is not as sharp. You're not as thinking as clearly. Your body's function-wise is not operating optimally. And so we need a rest. Rest. Eat. Again, I'm not talking about extremes. I'm just talking about pay attention to what we eat. Sugar, by some studies, is the second most addictive substance that we have. And we don't call it a drug because it's free, but it's addictive. It's just below. Dopamine's really addictive too, but opium's up there, opioid type of drugs. And so, just a principle that I've started trying to think more about. Am I legalistic about? I'm just sharing my story, Ben, because I'm trying to give hope to us all. Yeah. I'm not legalistic about this.
Tim, in fact, I would say this. I've talked to you about this before. I think you've avoided the extremes.
Yeah.
And when you talk about this, you normally are like, just take some steps. Like, just cut back a little. You don't do anything extreme that you can't sustain.
Yeah.
So when it comes to food, it's like eating smaller portions and, still enjoying some dessert, but being careful about how much. That's that kind of thing, right?
Right. Here's a principle that I'm starting to think about when I look at what I eat through the day. I'm trying to eat only those things that were once alive. So that's plants, plants and animals. Okay. But it's like, mostly eat. And so I know my dad had a bowl of ice cream, almost every night of at least his 60s, 70s. He passed away when he was 84. But, it's kind of like, I don't know if that's a gene or not, but I think I have that.
Yeah.
So I like sugar too. And so I have to ask myself, am I paying attention by eating mostly the things that God created, with plant life and what they provide for my body as well as the animal life. So
how do you feel about Reese's trees? Could
Reese's
we squeeze
trees.
that in there?
Yeah. So I think
it's a tree.
Yeah. Well, it's got peanut butter in it, and peanuts is a nut.
That was alive.
And so, yes, that's right. So,
now we got trees and nuts, dude. This is eat more Reese's trees.
That's right. Right.
Those things are so crazy good.
Everybody has their one kind of nemesis or whatever. And I'll tell you, mine is peanut butter. I do eat peanut butter. I eat peanut butter every day.
Me too.
In some form or fashion. So anyway, moving on.
Okay.
So
eating, and then what was the last one? Moving. Okay.
Here's the beautiful thing. And again, we could talk a lot. There's plenty of books out there about all this. I'm not talking about exercise and weightlifting and all that. Yes. Are those things beneficial? Absolutely. But our bodies were made to move. And so doing some simple activities, most recommend 10,000 steps a day. So get some steps in. And for me, I challenge myself with some different goals like that, but it's just movement. And then there's certain types of movement. In fact, you'll read some studies that say strength trumps cardio or eats cardio for breakfast. So a lot of people, I run every day. That's great. I do run every day. That's great. But over the last year or two, I've begun to see my age and the diminished effect that strength training of some sort has on my body. And so I would encourage folks to build in activity or movement. Again, you didn't hear me say exercise and all the stuff like that, but just simple things that is causing, there's kind of 6 basic movements. Again, can't unpack all these today, but sit, push, pull, squats, things like that, that kind of helps your motor functions and your joints. I heard this statistic, and I'm trying to retrace. I heard it from somebody. I'm trying to trace the source of it. But the statistic was 90% of all deaths for people over the age of 50 fall in the category or are in the category of falling. Your bones get more brittle, and if you haven't kind of done some strength change, something to keep your body moving, then the sensation of falling or the act of falling is creating more damage.
Working on just mobility.
Yeah. And hey, let me say this one more thing about this, Ben, because again, this is good for me to kind of reinforce it. When I talk about moving, I have to kind of apply something else other than the physical. There's neuropathic pathways. I need to be moving things in my head. So movement, like it's called the cat crawl, which is just basically getting on your hands and knees, and it's alternating your hands and knees as you're moving. You're forcing your mind to think, oh, wait, hold on, the left hand with the right knee.
Coordination.
Like coordination, things like that. That is helping to guard against actually some of the issues that cause cognitive decline.
Yeah.
So there's a movement of thinking, crossword puzzles. That's helping kind of move things in your head to challenge you, brain games, as well as the body moving.
That's good. Tim, do you own any yoga pants?
No, but I've heard the song about yoga pants.
I'm really glad you said no, because if you said yes, our friendship is over.
That's right. I would ask you to edit that out. So,
well, in some, let me say this, typical pastor, I would say typical unhealthy pastor. Let me be more clear. Mm-hmm. Spiritually, only in the Bible to prepare for his sermon on Sunday. Really easy to get into that mode. I mean, I've been there. Really easy. Emotionally, saying yes to every meeting he's invited to, preaching in the morning, preaching at night, staying after for meetings, before meetings, spending all day Monday feeling flu-like because he just did everything on Sunday. And then lastly, physically, maybe once a week going for taking the dog for a walk and calling that good. This is the gravitational pull of ministry. Without a lot of work and effort and inspiration, that's where we land.
Yeah, and it's simple. The encouragement is just take a half step forward.
Yep.
Try to make sure you're sleeping a little bit better. Try to who's the person that you can call occasionally just to say, hey, here's how I'm doing. Walk. You get out and walk one day a week or something like. Even in the morning when you get up, do 2 minutes of just stretching. Stuff that's very doable, but it's building in new rhythms and new practices, and the long-term effect of that, physically, emotionally, spiritually, from a health standpoint, is just will pay great dividends for the kingdom.
A really cool moment I had recently. I was out playing with I have 2 golden retrievers, and I was out throwing a tennis ball with them. And at this moment, my dog was returning the ball, and I got down on the ground on my knees, and I just played in the grass and stretched my body in ways I hadn't, that whole day. And I remember feeling this overwhelming sense of like, man, this feels really good to just be down on the ground and like my body's in a completely different position of just stretching out some, my legs. Like I tend to just sit at a desk all day or, sit and drink coffee with people, constantly finding ways to move around in different ways without my body just getting stuck in this one mode. It's hard.
Yeah, it is. And all I would say to that is I know we're kind of wrapping moving towards the end of this, but you mentioned the word play. And there's a whole conversation that we could have as adults, psychologically and physiologically, that we need to incorporate play a little bit more in our life.
Yes.
And so,
Well, that's the first bucket. Now, I'm going to mention the next 3 buckets, and I'm going to mention them quickly, and I'm going to let you pick which one you want to talk about for our last few minutes here.
Mm-hmm.
The reason the hobbies bucket is so important to me is because we were a person before we got into ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be an interesting person, that means you have to have interests.
Mm-hmm.
And the pastors that I know that are just great guys, they've gotten into woodworking. They've figured out how to love golf. They have a favorite jazz band that they like to go hear. They're big baseball fans, and they wear the jersey. Like they find some things off the ministry, timetable to just be a human being that's not trying to fix anybody or anything. And I just find the older I get, the more I'm envious of particularly men who have found some hobbies that are life-giving.
Yeah.
The third one is family. And this one may seem really obvious, but what I focus on this is, am I skirting responsibility with extended family? We spend a lot of time talking about our wife and our children, but I don't know about you, but in my family, a lot of times it's broken relationships with the greater extended family. Someone's going through a hard time and, has kind of stopped communicating, or, something happened that formed a rift in our relationship. Like that kind of stuff over time, if you don't care for it, it can really come back to create a mountain of hurt.
Yeah.
So the pastor, he has to worry about his wife and his children, but I think, what about brother-in-law, sister-in-law, father-in-law, mother-in-law, your own brothers and sisters? It's almost like pastors say, I don't have time for all that. Well, everybody else does.
Yeah.
So if you're going to Thanksgiving and you're not looking forward to seeing 3/4 of those people, we got a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm surprised how many pastors I talk to deal with that stuff, but they've never really given themselves permission to address it. And then lastly is friendship. I saw a short article by Chuck Swindoll years ago. He was asked wisdom for life. several things stood out to me, but the one that really stuck out to me was this. He said, cultivate a few lifelong friendships. All of us need a few people who knew us when we were in high school or college or before we went and got these important jobs, whatever these jobs are. I found that guys who are really healthy, they have an annual trip and they get together with their buddies and they figure out ways to be little kids again. It's rare to find a pastor that still does that because he won't take a Sunday off. Those are the ones I like to talk about: health, hobby, family, and friendship. So of those last three, Tim, which one would you want to comment on?
Man, you've got given great comment on all these. I might hit two of them and just make a statement about them.
Yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to hobbies, I think you've already said several things about that. But to me, the hobby is something that is for me.
Yep.
And so, and that may change. Like some guys switch, I'm going to try this year and this next year. They need that variety. That's great. But just find whatever it is, and begin to incorporate that into your life. Here's the thing: the benefit that others experience as a result of us incorporating these buckets into our life, it makes a world of difference. And so, hobbies is huge. The friendship one, the other one that I would say, give some comment on is friendship. Man, I moved around a lot.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like I have a lot of friends. But I envy those folks like you just said. I envy in a good way.
I agree.
Yeah.
I admire it.
I have some folks, I have some friends who have those types of friends. And they do that annual kind of get together and they go back to, high school days, some of them. So what my encouragement is, and Melody and I, as we've moved around a lot, in our adult life, we have a lot of friends, in different places, but we're at that season. We love our kids and a lot of people invest in their kids and that becomes their relationship world. But we're being much more intentional about trying to connect up and be with some friends. And it's a change for us, but we found it so healthy and so life-giving to be able to start to, to hang out with friends who we can just hang out with. So.
And it's really never too late. My wife, Lindley, she had 3 college roommates. They were the closest of friends. For 10 years, they had little kids. They texted and stayed in touch, but a few years ago they started meeting up every year, and she comes back from that time so refreshed, and her cup is overflowing. And I just started to pay attention to that. I'm like, now I'm jealous. Like, okay, maybe I should get healthy. Hey, maybe there's something to this friendship thing. The last thing I would say too about hobbies,
my friend.
Hobbies are so important. Here's why. When I sit down with a group of pastors, it just almost by default just goes to like, how's your church going? What theological book are you reading? But every once in a while I'll sit down with a pastor and he's like, man, I've started taking guitar lessons. I love playing guitar.
Right.
He just all of a sudden stands out in a crowd. He's interesting to me. Yeah. And I think pastors forget that a big part of our ministry is continuing to be a human being who enjoys things. Yeah. Like everybody else. So
our this year, for whatever reason, has been the year of the yard. So we have, I've learned a lot about yard work.
There you go.
And we've been focusing in on that, but it's been like so cool to walk out in my backyard and get down on some good grass. And, and so it was our hobby for a while. I don't know what it'll be through the winter or through next year, but it was so good for me to feel like, oh, this weekend I'm going to do this. Yeah. And it was enjoyable. So,
and you're out in the fresh air and you're moving around and stretching your body out. It's great. I love working in the yard. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Tim, thanks for talking about this. I hope there are some pastors out there listening, and, whether it's your health, your hobbies, your extended family, or your friendships, none of us is where we are in all of these categories. These are projects that never get fully finished. But I hope today there's been like maybe one thing. I love what Tim said, a half step. In one area, you say, you know what, I'm going to take a half step there. That really convicted me. I'm going to move forward and get a little healthier. Yeah. Well, thanks for being on the show, Tim. Can't wait to hang out with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, man. Really appreciate our friendship and look forward to the next time, whenever that may be.
Absolutely. The Glass House is executive produced by Angie Elkins, edited and engineered by Donnie Gordon with help from Nathan Howard. Show notes and production help from Nikki Ogden. Photography by Emily Bergeron and Bailey Watley. Recorded at the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee.